G'day everybody, how are you going today? It is so very good to see you. Today I want to try and get ahead of the wave. Petapixel, very big website, very big YouTube channel. These people have a lot of influence, have put out an article stating that Nikon are in dire straits. Now, this article is the summary of another article, which is the summary of an original article. Those first two articles are originally in Japanese. Now, the thing I find interesting about this article is that I feel like the information in there is a little bit cherry-picked, and even so, this article quotes Nikon's financial report and their plans ahead. It just cherry-picks one particular piece of information from that report and doesn't talk about some of the other aspects of that financial report, that official report from Nikon. So in this video, I just want to touch on the fact that I've spent a fair bit of time following what Nikon are doing from a financial perspective, looking at the market, so on and so forth. I'm no expert, but I do think in the interests of balanced reportage that both sides of the story need to be there. I think it's absolutely critical. So just before I jump into all of that, I wanted to say that this video is being shot on the Nikon Z5 with the 70-200 2.8 VRS, shot in 4K, and the 4K has a 1.7 times crop. But when this camera was first announced, I always speculated whether it could be used within my ecosystem. Basically, from my perspective, in 4K, it's similar to a Z50, as in the amount of crop. Similar, not the same, because that's 1.5 versus 1.7. So here we are testing it for people who are interested, who perhaps might want to do something like me, use it as a stills camera, very competent, but also use it in 4K. So here we are. All right. Let's talk about this article. Perhaps it's a good thing that Nikon are into dire straits. Who wouldn't want some money for nothing? It's a little joke there for you, a little bit of brevity before we get deep and go hard. Now, firstly, I just want to state there continues to be the ongoing pile-on Nikon. Doesn't matter where you look, across the board. And I still find it bemusing, the general overview that people simply cannot accept that when Sony releases a camera and Canon releases a camera and Nikon releases a camera and Fuji releases a camera and Panasonic releases a camera, they are not all going to release it at the same time. And I believe there is just simply this overzealous attack on these companies, and especially it seems to be Nikon. And sure, in regards to the big three, they are slowest to the party when it comes to the high-end bodies. But it's normal. This is normal. Yet it's being touted as not being normal. And I just wish all the pundits out there would, in their reportages, talk about the fact that it's normal. Yes, Nikon are going to be last of the big three to get out their top of the range cameras. This is true. Not all camera companies do it at the same time. And it looks like, from what we're hearing, Nikon are going to get theirs out within 6 to 9 months of when Canon got theirs out. And you could argue that Canons weren't ready because of the overheating gate, which is still being solved, addressed, mitigated, worked around today. It's fine to say that Nikon is where they are, but I think it needs to be peppered and, in the interests of balanced reporting, acknowledged that it's normal that these companies do not release products on the same day, on the same week, on the same month, and not even on the same year. These cycles can leapfrog each other in sort of 2-year time periods. That's just how it's been. And ultimately, what I see here is that the news cycle is outpacing reality, and the news cycle is actually driving the agenda. It's actually driving sentiment. It's ultimately driving reality. Now, the problem with, in the end, the news cycle driving reality is reality gets distorted. Just to reiterate what I just said before, these cycles can go in 1 or 2 year leaps. It can be Sony in 2012, Canon in 2013, and Nikon in 2014, and then they all do the next leap. And that's normal, and that's how it can be. So this notion that Nikon are behind and that they're failing does not take into account how this ecosystem, how this world works, how it's always worked. Canon released their mirrorless at the same time as Nikon. This massive lag between the arrival of the Sony 35mm alpha cameras, detachable lens cameras, and Canon and Nikon. It's just normal. Yet now suddenly that piece of information, that the cycles leapfrog and move at different times, different time scales, that information is always left to one side, and it's simply that Nikon are failing. I would like to say it's unfair, but if we're to be technical, I actually just think it is not even level reportage. It's not presenting all the data of which the camera world exists in. So to get to that detail in regards to the financial report. Now this whole article talks about all sorts of stuff, and all of it we've heard before. There's actually nothing new in there. And the data that they're talking about completely, at least in Petapixel's version, I don't know if the two other Japanese, the summation of the original, I don't know if the original and the Japanese summation included this information, but Nikon states in their official annual reports, in their quarterly report, that they believe they will be in profit by the end of 2021 and certainly by 2022. And this to me is the more damning part of all of this. This is Nikon's statement. Now, in the interest of fair reportage, that should absolutely be in an article like this, that this is Nikon's intention. Sure, this person can have analysis that they think Nikon might not get it right, but this is what Nikon thinks. This is what they formally think. And I'd just like to remind everybody, a year ago, Nikon told us they would definitely be losing money this year and it wouldn't go well. And they told us what was going to happen, and they gave us a number, and they actually did better than that number. So this is what companies have to do. It's called guidance. They give their shareholders and the world guidance. Well, this is their guidance for 2021 and 2022. And it's just simply inappropriate in an article that is specifically about Nikon's financial health, that in the interest of fair reportage, you do not mention the fact that this is Nikon's guidance for next year. It's just next year and the year after. They've cherry-picked some particular pieces of information, but not put in the counter, the fair reportage. And I find a big problem with this. And ultimately, why is this happening? Why is a reputable large site like Petapixel doing this? And ultimately what I see is just clicks, traffic, the news cycle, something to talk about, something to get people coming. But that is no reason to create an unbalanced, not presenting both sides piece of reportage. And of course, this isn't just Petapixel. This is appearing all over the place. And I want people like Petapixel to contemplate ultimately the outcomes of their actions. Do they consider the fact that Nikon could die a death by 1,000 cuts, of which Petapixel and many others are part of those 1,000 cuts? Do they ever consider the fact that this is not a game, and that by engaging in this constant negative Nikon narrative, what they're doing may well be a self-fulfilling prophecy? Do they ever consider this? I just think it's absolutely critical. And what I see in my comments is people who either read the same things I read and understand the same things I understand, and they're comfortable with where Nikon sits. And that's a lot of people. But I also see a lot of people who are just defaulting to the headlines not really overly interested in drilling into both sides of the story, and then believe that Nikon is dead, is dying, is in dire straits. So again, I just want to repeat that point. Do these companies realize that this isn't a game, that marketing, influence, the death by 1,000 cuts, they could actually bring this company down. They are part of the narrative to bring this company down. And I find that deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing that they're okay with that. I would have thought if you're going to make such a negative comment about such an important photographic institution, an important company for millions of people, that is absolutely incumbent upon the reporter to absolutely reveal both sides of the ledger, both sides of the story. So I implore, if any of these parties ever watch this video, be mindful that you have a great deal of power. Be mindful that you have influence. Be mindful that the photographers, pros and enthusiasts, we all have a little bit of a look at YouTube. Magazines are becoming more and more a thing of the past, so YouTube and websites are really now the only go-to places to find out the truth about things. And these platforms are becoming more and more powerful day by day as traditional news media is struggling to survive. So dig deep and really understand your influence and your power. You've really got to understand it and respect it, because people respect you. Your scale brings respect. Your size brings respect. Not everybody feels that way, but many do. Many default to that. You're big, so you must know what you're talking about. You've got a lot of reach and a lot of influence, so you must know what you're talking about. It's critical to have both sides of the story when you are reporting on the health and finance of a company like this. My personal opinion, Nikon deserves better. They're a proud, large company that has been a massive contributor to the photographic world. That cannot be taken from them. And I'm sure there's some punks out there who just want to go, oh yeah, but they're just not as good as Sony. Completely irrelevant to photographic history. Sony would not be where they are today without companies like Nikon and Canon creating a market, creating the tools that we use today. Nikon's contribution to photography is absolutely massive and sizable. Just by its contribution over the last 100 years, it simply deserves respect, and I just think that's something that the world is not overly interested in 2020. But what I see with Nikon is that they are clearly creating a roadmap of lenses, video you can see here, and the bodies are going to be completely fleshed out. My guess is by roughly the middle of next year. So in the next 6 to 7 months of this video being recorded. This is a fine place to be, and at that point, Nikon will be on par with Canon, give or take, and they will be on par with Sony, give or take. What I also find most troubling is at that point where they're all jostling around the same points and the cameras might vary here and there 5–10%, is that actually Nikon have some advantages over their competitors, which for these naysayers are never really talked about, and all I hear is focus tracking. And now this seems to be watered down to, well, Nikon's focus tracking may well be just fine, but the little yellow box doesn't keep up, but the images are actually in focus. I'm not an action person. I don't dwell in that space. I'm not the best person to be addressing or answering that question. But I do a lot of reading and watching, and that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm reading. So if these cameras right now, and these are the mid-level Nikons, if these cameras right now satiate 95, 90%, 95 of their customers, and everybody knows the pro bodies aren't here yet, and everybody knows this is the normal cycle, then there's actually nothing to talk about. We know they're coming. We know we're looking at the middle of the range cameras. So what's all the belly aching? What's all the sadness? What's all this noise about? I feel like it's noise for the sake of noise. Is that possible? I think it is. Let me say that all one more time, just for it to sink in. We know the cameras to date, Z6 II, Z7 II, still middle of the range of Nikon's cameras. We know the Z8 and Z9 are on their way. We're pretty confident we'll see them in the first half of next year. The lens roadmap shows us there's some serious pro glass coming, and it's coming soon. I've just read another article that the 400 and 600 millimeter primes are coming next year soon. The bodies need to come to match those lenses. So there is nothing unusual going on here. There's no negativity. I absolutely see the absolute corners of details now being picked at in regards to Nikon. Can we all move on? Would it be possible to give Nikon a chance? The next 6, 12, 24 months of products we're actually pretty aware of. Can't we just let that happen now? Why not? Can't we let these products come out and then talk about it again in 6 to 12 months' time? Can we now not talk about what we're actually here for, which is the joy of creating, the process of creating, the journey of making photographs, crafting pieces of artwork, and the joy of the image, the final product, looking at the image, and also the joy that I think most photographers have is actually loving their gear. Sony users, you're allowed to love your gear. Canon users, you're allowed to love your gear. Panasonic users, Fuji users, Olympus users, Hasselblad users, Leica users, you're allowed to love your gear. Can we love our gear and talk about it with each other, not in fear? It's actually bloody ridiculous what's going on right now. World, take a good hard look at yourself. Come on, seriously. Nobody is doing this perfectly. No company is doing this perfectly. And if you're going to report Nikon are in dire straits, you've got to tell both sides of the story. That is critical. Well, everybody, good to see you. I hope the Nikon negative narrative doesn't just crash again, as it just seems to every 2 or 3 months. The reality is, if you continue to want to have that negative Nikon narrative, please have it. And I'm all for freedom of speech. This is not about freedom of speech. We're just not interested. I'd love your comments. I'd love them to be wise, intelligent, thoughtful, and balanced. That is the community and environment I'm certainly trying to promote here. All right, see you later.